Welcome back to the channel this week. I think we've got a really great episode for you. We're going to be talking about the 3 most important zoom lenses for landscape photography. But before I get started, I really want to send out my thoughts and prayers for the Ukrainian people and what they're going through right now. They shouldn't have to go through this. I know I've got some subscribers in the Ukraine and I really feel for them right now. I've got a friend that has a daughter that's stuck over there in Kyiv, and I can't imagine what he's going through. So right after the break, we'll be getting right into the 3 most important zoom lenses for landscape photography. So let's get started. The first lens I'm going to talk about is this lens right here. This is a Fuji 10-24, which equals out to basically a 16-35 in Canon or Sony, or full frame terms, I should say. And Sony, Nikon, Canon, they all have this wide angle zoom, or I should say ultra wide angle zoom. And it's a great tool, but really it's almost a specialty lens in a way, because really it's meant for emphasizing foregrounds and getting the grand landscape in. Now, I've used this lens a lot, and that's because I really like a lot of foreground in a lot of my shots, and especially with verticals. Vertical foreground is everything. You want to make sure you get lines leading in and everything. So this lens is really good for that. So right now we're going to go over some of the things that this lens is good for and some of the things it's not so good for, and some of the ways that we can use this lens productively. Wide angle zooms, ultra wide to wide. Really best for grand landscapes and strong foreground subject emphasis. Now in this first image we see more of a grand landscape with the tree in the foreground, and it really makes a lot of sense to use this wide angle lens for this particular shot. Now this next shot here, I use the 10-24 with that ultra wide angle right down low, get all that water coming right at you. It really is great for this particular purpose. And as you can see with this shot of pemaquid light, got down low, emphasize that foreground. It really makes a lot of sense to use that wide lens. This shot of Luttrell Falls in Oregon, same thing, got down low and emphasized the leading lines going up to this waterfall. And then this shot made up in Franconia Notch, these young lupins coming out in the spring, emphasize that foreground leading out to the background. In this next shot here of these daffodils, wanted to emphasize that foreground again. That's what these wide lenses are for. In this next shot that's coming up of this derelict boat at sunset, same thing, emphasize that foreground. That's what these wide angle lenses are really meant for, is to emphasize that foreground. And one of the great things about using a wide angle zoom here is that you get this wide shot with the trees overhanging the water like this, and then move a little bit to the right to get a different composition and zoom in a little bit closer to about 35 millimeter, which makes a great scene. So the next lens I'm going to talk about is the most versatile landscape lens that you can own. And I suggest that beginners start out with this lens because it's the easiest to get used to and it covers most of the ranges that you're going to need. And that is the 24-70, or in APS-C terms, it's like a 16-70 in Sony, or a 16-80 for Fuji, like this one here. And for me, on this particular camera here, the X-T3, which is a Fuji body, it goes from 24 to 120. That's a great range. There's a lot of things you can do with landscape photography that will involve this lens. What is it good for? It's really great for wide angle things. I use it all the time for shooting wide angle work. And it's also great for making order out of chaos, so you can zoom in on things. And I'll tell you, one of the examples I'm going to show you here is how I use it to work my way through a composition. And if there's one specific subject that I really like, but I want to show in different ways, this lens is really great for that. So this next lens I'm going to talk about is the wide to short telephoto, or it's a mid-range zoom. And it's great for general landscapes, great wide option at 24 millimeter. Good for making order out of chaos. It's great for moderate close-up work, and it's a great short telephoto as well. Now this first shot here of Marshall Point Light up in Maine is a great example of how to use that 24 millimeter lens to get that perspective shot. It really works well here. The next shot here, I'm at the Portland Headlight up in Portland, Maine. Show that how I use foreground to lead you up into the lighthouse. Now this next shot is a great example of how you can use at 24 millimeter lens. You can get almost everything in the scene that you need to get in. Now in these next two shots, I'm going to show you the range of the 16 to 80. You get this nice shot here at 16 or 24 millimeters full frame, and then you zoom out all the way out to 120 or 80 on the APS-C lens to get this particular shot here. So I get two great shots with one lens from basically the same location. And this shot here, again, up at the basin in Franconia Notch, in tight on this at 120. Now this door in Rockport, same thing, all the way in at 120 or 80 on the APS-C lens, and this is what you get. You're able to isolate and get a great shot. Now this shot here is another example of isolating a scene so it's nice and simple, and you're able to do that with the 16 to 80 or the 24 to 70 range. And in tight here on this hood ornament on a car up in Maine. Now this next shot coming up is of Nubble Light up in York, Maine, and you can see it's all about the foreground here and including that background to make the image. Now this shot here up at Bailey Island, you got this rock leading up to the lobster shack with the reflection. The next most important lens that you want to look at is a 70 to 200 in full frame terms. In APS-C, that would be 55 to 200, 70 to 300, somewhere in that range. And this Fuji's new lens here, the 70 to 300, is like a 105 all the way out to a 420, which is really useful. The 55 to 200, I'm going to show you some images I've taken with this. This is a great little lens as well. At the long end, that goes all the way up to 300 in full frame terms. And really, this lens is for making sense out of chaos, getting in a little bit tighter. And with this lens here, the 70 to 300, you can really get in tight. And the interesting thing is that with most of these lenses, you can actually zoom in pretty close, so you can do some close-up work, or it's not macro work, but it's close-up work. But I really like using these lenses for compression. They're all about compression, pulling in backgrounds into the foreground a little bit, and I'm going to show you some examples of that. And also layering. So when you get atmospheric conditions where you get a little bit of fog, a little bit of haze, whatever it is, and you're shooting in the mountains, for instance, and I'm going to show you some examples here where you're going to get some nice layering, and they're beautiful lenses for that. Now the next thing on the list is the telephoto zoom, or the 70 to 200, but in APS-C terms, 70 to 300 or 55 to 200, somewhere in that range. Now what is it good for? It's good for compressing elements, pulling in away subjects, showing layers, getting in tight, and making sense out of chaos. Now this shot here of autumn color underneath a covered bridge really is all about bringing those elements together with that 55 to 200. And this shot here, shot with the 70 to 300, is all about compression. We're trying to get the tour boat interacting with the background, which is Portland, Maine. Now this next shot here is about compression and layers. We got the barn, got the silos, we've got the autumn color in the background, and then the mountain behind it. This next shot is all about compression, getting that moon to stand out behind the lighthouse like this. And now the shot coming up is the same lighthouse, but it's shot with the 70 to 300 and the tele extender on it, and it really enlarges that moon, getting that compression going on. Now the next shots coming up are all about showing layers and how layers work with a telephoto lens. You can see how there's so many layers going on all the way out to the mountains in the background. And the same with this, with the sunset over Cannon Mountain in Franconia Notch. It's doing the same thing. It's showing you layers. The same thing is true with this image here. There's layers in it and there's compression. You can see this wave in the foreground and the layers that are going out to the out of focus lighthouses in the background. Now this shot here is all about bringing that moon up and making it a little bit bigger in the frame to interact with this house. This next shot here is nice and tight. This is such a cool shot. The 55 to 200 really made a difference here. So I know that Sony and Canon and I believe Nikon all have straight aperture f4 telephoto zooms. The APS-C lenses don't tend to do that. I know that this is the 3548 or something like that, or 3845, something like that. And this lens here, the 70-300, is an f4 256, which it's not a killer problem when it comes to landscapes because you're shooting at higher apertures anyway. So you're shooting up around f11, you know, f14, f16 maybe. So it's really not that big a deal. So for me, the holy trinity of landscape zoom lenses are the 16 to 35, the 24 to 70, and the 70 to 200. That's all full frame terms. In APS-C terms, it's like a 10 to 24, and then a 16 to 80, and then a 70 to 300, somewhere in that range. But really, these three lenses will do everything for you. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying that if I need real long length, where I really want to compress things and make the moon larger around a lighthouse or something like that, I have a 100 to 400 that I can put a tele extender on, and it's up there around 875, so I can really make the moon look a lot bigger in conjunction to a lighthouse or something like that. But the three main lenses that you want to look at are those, and I think you'll get great use out of them. If you get a chance, check out capeannphototours.com. We've got a great tour coming up in June with Bill Fortney, the main lighthouse tour. We did it last year. We had a great time, and I know you'll enjoy it. If you wouldn't mind, please give me a like, a comment, and subscribe to the channel. That would be great. And that's it for this week. And remember, it's not what you photograph, it's how you photograph it. And we'll talk to you next time.